And just for a note for everybody, we are officially live on Access Humboldt.
Oh boy.
Thank you, Tyler. So Frank, you have everybody present and accounted for.
All right, and then we want to call this meeting to order then? Is that where we're at?
That's where we are at.
Well, then we call this monthly meeting of HWMA, Humboldt Waste Management Authority for May. Call to order and roll call, please.
Hogan.
Yes, here.
Yeah, missed it. So.
Wow. I don't know.
Herrera.
Here.
See if you could change the name. I don't know.
I think he's still figuring himself out.
Hello.
Hey,
Hello.
Robin.
Hi.
Robin.
I'm going to count here. Castellano.
Here.
Bone.
Present and accounted for.
And Wilson.
Tell them it says the wrong name because you're
Yeah.
using my iPad.
Right.
We noticed that, Janet.
Yes. I felt so good since my operation.
Didn't change your voice.
I'm not sure what we're doing at this point. The last I heard was
You
phone.
have everybody
Answer
in
here.
attendance, and you are ready to proceed when you are ready.
So Frank, Tyler has a bit of a communication challenge because he's having to record through his phone is how he's communicating. So he's a little bit muted as compared to the rest of us that are using our devices. So if you're not hearing him entirely. So it looks like we've got everybody present and accounted for. So the first item on the agenda is going to be the consent calendar. I do want to make sure that all board members are aware that there was an email that was sent out this morning with the attachment for page 25, which is amendment number 2 for the agreement with the Stericycle Clean Earth Incorporated. That is an extension for a 1-year period for these services to exercise it. And it'll be terminating in November of this year. To remind board members, we will be putting out our RFP for hazardous waste services. We expect to have that coming to the board at the June meeting for your consideration. So this item has been emailed to you. It was also placed onto the web, and it has been approved by Stericycle's legal counsel, and our general counsel has also reviewed and approved of that document that you have before you this evening. So other than that, if anybody has any questions, we can answer anything pertaining to consent calendar, but that's what you have, Chairman Wilson.
Does anybody wish to repull an item from the consent calendar?
The,
You do want to pull an item, Rex?
hang on a sec. No, I'm fine. Go ahead.
And appears no board members want, anyone in the public wish to pull an item from the consent calendar?
I do not see any raised hands. So I don't believe anybody has anything they'd like to pull.
All right, in that case, I'll entertain a motion to accept the consent calendar.
I'll make a motion to accept the consent calendar. This is Leslie.
I'll
Okay,
second.
we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you.
We have a second. I guess it was Elaine,
That was Sophia.
Sophia. All right, we have a motion with a second. Please take a roll call vote, I guess. That's how we're doing it.
Absolutely. Hogan,
Yes.
Herrera,
Aye.
Smith,
Aye.
Castellano,
Aye.
Bone,
Sure.
and Wilson.
Yes.
Motion
motion
passes
carries.
unanimously.
Next item is oral or written communication. This is the time is provided for people to address the board on or to submit written communications concerning matters not on this agenda. Board members may respond to statements, but any request requires board action will be referred to the staff for review. Reasonable time permits limits may be imposed on both the total amount of time allocated for this item and on time permitted to each individual. Such time allotted or portion shall not be transferred to other speakers. Anyone from the public have an item for oral communication or written communication?
And Chairman, I have not received any email correspondence. Tyler, have you received anything in the general mailbox?
I have not. We have not received any communication on this meeting.
And I don't know if there's anybody who is on the line who is interested at this time, but I'm not seeing anything. Maybe Tyler is.
Yeah, I don't see any hands raised, and I don't see anybody typing into chat or anything. So I do not believe you have any public comment on
Okay.
items not on the agenda.
Seeing none, then I will close public comment and move on to item 4, which is approved fiscal year 2021-22 budget and resolution 2022-01. I guess that's back to the executive director.
It is. And Tyler, I'm going to have you enable the screen share and let's see here.
You should have full control.
I feel like it's like a airplane kind of thing. Shoot. Oh dear me. We have a new thing here. Come on. I have a new computer, so I'm encountering some issues when they happen, apparently. It is not letting me share my presentation with you.
Jill,
That's a
would you like me
problem.
to share the presentation?
Do you have it? Yes, it's all there. There's no changes. Yes.
Okay. Give me just a moment here. We're going to go to slideshow.
Excellent. Thank you. Glad we got the redundancy. So, in short, this is our final fiscal year 21-22 budget. And go ahead and move on to the next screen, please. As board members will recall, you received a copy of the draft fiscal year budget in February, and we've been doing a lot of work on the budget in the last couple of months. And then in the end of April, we gave a presentation to the Executive Advisory Committee. I will share with you their final recommendations towards the end of the presentation, but we did present this budget to them a little over a week ago. And of course, this evening, we are asking that the board will adopt the fiscal year 21-22 budget as well as our fee rate resolutions. We will make sure that these fee rate resolutions, which will contain adjustments, will be made to the member agencies, our contractors, and our franchise haulers in accordance with the joint powers agreement provision. Next slide, please. So our general approach, of course, go ahead and hit the first button, is that we are considering our fiscal year 21-22 budget as the base document for purposes of developing the document that you have before you. Next. And we are continuing to have our ongoing, identification of internal savings for cost. And then, of course, we are continuing to identify and evaluate necessary budgetary actions that will ensure stable level of funding and services. There are a couple of things that are different, not very many, with respect to this version of the budget versus the one that you heard in February. One is that the Humboldt County Local Enforcement Agency has withdrawn their proposed fee rate increase of that 57 cents per ton. Board members may remember we had a pretty extensive conversation about this. It was primarily because the fee has been assessed and collected by HWMA and Humboldt Sanitation. However, the Fortuna has not been, the residents of the city of Fortuna have not been paying into the LEA fund. And so I think that's been ongoing since about 2002. And there have been a number of efforts over several years in order to regain that. Quite frankly, it's an unfair business practice if you want to take a look at it, because all of our member agencies are paying this fee, which is supporting the county LEA program. And we have one entity that is not. And as I noted, there have been a number of meetings that have been occurring, and Merritt Perry is the city manager of Fortuna, and he has really done a remarkable job of getting his head wrapped around many of the solid waste and recycling issues that, that have sort of languished for a bit. So he's been examining this, and he is now working with their county council at looking at incorporating this fee into their rate structure. And I know that I want to give a quick shout out to Linda Wise, because she has also been very helpful in helping to facilitate this conversation forward. And the LEA has expressed their appreciation and finally getting some traction on and getting some resolution and getting some parity on this. As a consequence from these conversations, the LEA has formally withdrawn their fee rate increase, and hopefully by folding Fortuna into the fold, we should see some stabilization of that. The next item, of course, is that we will have our final payment in November of 2021 of about $850,000, which is going to be related to the retirement of the annual long-term debt payment. I do want to note that each year we've been paying about $800 and some odd $1,000, but this one is going to be a little different because it's going to be a balloon payment in November. And so we are being mindful and cautious of the fact that that can affect some of our cash flow. And so we will be trying to we'll monitor, and we're going to be staggering how we are moving forward with some of our project implementation on items to make sure that we have adequate cash on hand. There is that one. The next bullet, please. I believe there's a third one. I do want to note that the recertification of the CRV redemption services are not included in this presentation. I will go into this one a little bit more, but in short, we're developing a plan and cost estimates, and they'll be developed and they'll be considered by the board at a later date. And it'll just make it for a cleaner conversation on that particular topic. Next slide, please. This is just the general outline of the presentation topics, and we'll move through these fairly quickly because there are not a lot of changes between what you saw in February and this meeting. Next one, please. So of course, the operating budget assumptions are such that we've got the revenue. For our revenue, tonnage will be at about 75,000 tons annually. We will continue our modified programs and services. I say modified because this just really reflects the fact that CRV is not included in here at this time. And of course, we do have some proposed changes to adjust the cost for some non-standard material. In the realm of our expenditures, we're looking at contract CPI adjustments of about 2%. We have seen an overall payroll decrease of 0.59%, and that is related primarily to the fact that we're requesting that 2 material diversion tech positions be frozen. And of course, that does affect PERS and medical, but I do want to note that our workers' compensation overall has gone down about 12% if you take a look at that, and that is a direct result of our employees and being really mindful and very cautious about their work environment. We haven't had any claims for a bit. And of course, we do have our capital improvement projects. Next slide, please. So what does this look like? In terms of projected revenue, we're looking at a little over $13,153,491, about $10 million of which is in operations. In terms of pass-through and some of the base fees, that represents just shy of $2.5 million. And again, these are funds that HWMA collects, and then we distribute according to the agreements in some cases that we have. And then, of course, we have some other revenues in the form of about $284,000. This represents primarily grants and, of course, some timber revenue that we're expecting from this year's logging operations. Next slide, please. In terms of our expenditures, again, it's $13,153,491, which means we have a balanced budget and we have no net income anticipated. It's a very tight budget that is being presented before you. And we have our operational expenditures at 4.9 million, payroll and benefits at 2.7, fees that are passed through and programs at a little over $3 million. This includes programs such as the county LEA and the Table Bluff landfill, Cummings Road landfill, as well as rural container sites, and a little bit of the funds that are used for the illegal disposal of picking up, excuse me for a second. Can I have you not making noise? Huh, thanks. Sorry, it's a small house. So anyways, so some of those programs, and of course we have our indirect expenditures at 1.5 million and capital expenditures at 674,000. Next slide, please. Our capital expenditures and improvements, as noted at the beginning of the presentation, we have our annual long-term debt obligation. This will be our final payment. It is in the form of $849,244. And we have non-capital improvement expenditures that are anticipated in the form of $27,000. This is going to be related primarily to some repair and replacement of our gas and leachate collection systems up at the Cummings Road landfill. Next slide, please. In terms of our major capital improvement projects for fiscal year 21-22, we are looking at replacement of blower number 3 at the landfill. This blower is related to our flare operations for the destruction of methane gases up at the landfill. Next one, please. Our waste management fee, a lot of you are familiar with. I realize, Robin, this is the first time that you're getting to see all of this information in a bit of a package here, but our waste management fee, and we oftentimes just refer to it as the tip fee. It is comprised of 3 primary components. One is the countywide program fee, and we'll go into this in just a minute, a little deeper. We have our base tip fee, which is our administration, universal waste, recycling programs, Cummings Road landfill and operations, as well as our facility fees. And those 3 components, and in those components, there are individual line items, but those are the 3 groupings, if you will, which comprise our fee. Next slide, please. And we got this sideways. This one makes it a little difficult. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. There we are. Go ahead and turn off. So as noted, you can see the 3 groupings here in the bold. Countywide program fees includes administration, household hazardous waste program, Cummings Road landfill maintenance, cleanup and enforcement programs, rural container site, county, cities, AB 939 programs, Table Bluff landfill maintenance, and countywide enforcement, which is the LEA. These are fees that are generated on every ton of solid waste, which is generated within our member agencies. We then collect those monies and then distribute it according to the intended purpose. So in the case of the LEA, they receive $234,000 annually. So that's kind of how that breaks out. And again, it's for every ton of of material that comes in, whether it's self-haul, franchise, or it's collected at our satellite facilities. And of course, self-hauled material, which is sent directly to landfills by independent contractors. And then of course, we have our HWMA base fee and our facility fee. And what we are looking at for our total proposed waste management fee for self-haul will remain at $155.82 a ton. Franchise rates will remain at $129.01 per ton. And of course, the satellite facilities being Fortuna and Humboldt Sanitation's collection for our member agency waste will be at $98.57. Some folks sometimes think that it's less expensive going there, but the difference is the fact that we are not collecting their indirect or capital expenditures from their facilities. So that ends up being incorporated in the franchise agreements with those entities. But what you're seeing here is that our waste management fee is remaining unchanged. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, this is my first draft, so I don't get the opportunity to drop into the correct table, but we do have some non-standard material fees that we are asking the board to consider. As you are all aware, underneath the new DTSC provisions, HWMA did apply, and we learned yesterday that we have been granted a waiver for 6-month variance to accept treated wood waste at the transfer station. This will mean that hold on one second, Tyler. This will mean that residents who are bringing their materials will no longer have to have them cut up into those 3-foot sections and then bringing them over to the household hazardous waste facility. We will be able to have a designated area at the transfer station, and we will then handle that material. Go ahead and move on to the next bullet, please. As noted, we've been approved. We're going to be putting together some of the steps that are necessary for us to collect it. It's going to have to be segregated. It is going to have to be transported separately to a permissible California landfill. Board members will remember that all of our material is transported to Dry Creek, which is located up in White City, Oregon, and we won't be able to bring our treated wood waste to them. So we'll have to collect and transport separately using another transporter. So what we're asking the board to do through this next bullet is that we would establish a $10 special handling fee plus the actual weight of the material. So if you bring in a ton of treated wood waste, you'd be charged $155 for the ton plus $10 special handling, and then we will be working with a transporter to get the material disposed of. We may end up coming back to the board with a recommended rate adjustment. We believe that this should cover all of the costs, and we will just be monitoring that pretty closely. Next bullet. And of course, the real key here, as you'll note, DTSC has issued us a 6-month variance. There is a possibility that we could get an extension if necessary for an additional 6 months, but that is the extent of the allowable time. So we are encouraging all of our member agencies to submit letters of support for SB 332, and that particular legislation will essentially put into place the alternate management standards, which allows us to handle the material this way. Next slide, please. The other non-standard material fee, which is identified in table 10 in the resolution that is in your packet, is for the Recology recycling rate adjustment fee. So first bullet, please. Our current rate is $92.92 a ton. That is the charge that Recology has their customers paying for the sorting of curbside collected materials. Now, HWMA, when we entered into the agreement and we were working with all of our member agencies, we have an adjusted residual credit. So the rate that our member agencies are paying are $73.57 per ton for all of our participating agencies. Next. Recology has submitted their rate adjustment, and what they are requesting is $102.24 per ton, or as adjusted for HWMA's member agencies, $82.89 a ton. Next. This does represent an increase of 12.67% and rate increase. I think that there's a bullet that was missing.
Yes, that was it.
Okay.
It goes forward from.
Perfect. I think maybe I didn't get this one finalized either. So in the course of the rate review process, we went through and had some clarifications with Recology through this process. The final rate adjustment does reflect the adjustment of the 15% residual credit as is provided by HWMA to our member agencies. And the primary reasons for the increase is basically increased contamination at consumer cans. We are seeing anywhere between 21 and 26% contamination in curbside containers. This has been a topic of conversation at the local task force. And the freight to market cost is now trued up, if you will. When they submitted their original proposal, it underestimated the freight to market cost. The third reason is that there are a number of recyclable materials which are now prohibited underneath the UN Basel Convention, and there are a number of plastics, and they're no longer able to be recycled, so they can only be at this time landfilled, unless of course you can enter into some sort of a special agreement for the recycling of that material. And of course, we are continuing to really struggle with the depressed commodities market, which is causing the consumer to pay more at the curbside. So we are recommending that the board approve the increase of 12% rate increase. Next slide, please. In terms of personnel compensation and related items, as noted earlier, we do have an overall cost decrease of 0.59%, represents about $16,000. And we're recommending that the board have 2 material diversion tech positions frozen. These would be 2 positions that are currently assigned over at the Eureka Recycling Center. And, quite frankly, not having CRV right now, our folks are kind of hit and miss. We've got a lot of people that are bringing in source separated material, a lot of electronics and a lot of appliances, but not enough to keep our fully staffed positions. So with the vacancy of a couple of personnel, we're recommending that the board go ahead and freeze the positions until we've had an opportunity to talk about the robust CRV recertification and establishment. We've also seen a reduction of PERS cost by 2.31%. Again, this is related primarily to having these positions frozen. In terms of the Medicare workers' compensation, it's overall reduction of about 17.46%, and about 12% of that was related to the workers' compensation. Health insurance, our costs have gone up about 6.42%, and I think that this is my 8th budget that I've presented to the board. This is the first time I haven't seen it in double digits, so maybe things are finally beginning to stabilize as far as health insurance is concerned. Next slide, please. In terms of our reserve accounts, and we're going to need to change, we do have this titled trust fund, and the trust fund account related to our previous funds that were held by Union Bank for the closure of the Cummings Road landfill. That is now a 0 balance with the landfill being closed. In terms of operating reserves, this is set by policy by the board, and it is based on what our operational expenditures are. because we've seen a decrease of our operational expenditures, we're seeing a corresponding decrease of what we need. So it remains fully funded at $971,000. Our capital improvement reserve fund is at $35,942. That does represent the blower project that we have moving forward. We have our rate stabilization reserve, which is fully funded at $400,000. And our personnel stabilization fund reserve is also fully funded at $150,000. So our total amount, one more bullet here, is $1.5 million that are available for undesignated and designated reserves. Next slide, please. The next bullet is related to the North Coast RMDZ. And there's an allocation that has been built in at $15,000. The North Coast RMDZ program is being administered by the County of Humboldt's Economic Development Division, and we are recommending that this continue to be funded. Next slide, please. So as I previously noted, the Executive Advisory Committee, and for board members that may be less familiar with the Executive Advisory Committee, that is comprised of the city managers and the county CAO's office. And they meet annually to review our budgets and make a recommendation to the board. And they are recommending approval of the budget, and they had the following observations they wanted to make sure that the board heard. One is that they list and they urge that the HWMA board recognize that the authority has had 5 years of no tip fee increase. This budget represents the 6th year of no tip fee increase. And they're asking that the board discuss expansion of regionalization efforts, of HWMA planning and staffing capacity, and to define the scope of HWMA's involvement in regional approaches to assist or lead in SB 1383 compliance and in other materials diversion such as CRV. And that the board should be planning for rate increases or other methods in the upcoming years to enable SB 1383 implementation cost, ideally using a 5-year forecast. So this is a pretty unusual step by the advisory committee, and it actually mirrors a lot of what we're starting to hear from the local task force as well, asking that HWMA be more involved in a lead capacity around SB 1383 compliance. As I noted at the last meeting, it's actually been really great to see. We've tried for a number of years to work on regional issues and just haven't been able to get very far. And I think that 1383 is serving a pretty sobering kind of moment for everybody, realizing just how broad in scope and what is going to be required for implementation. So we're seeing that with the local task force and now with the executive advisory committee also. And this was a unanimous vote that came forward. Next slide, please. So we're asking that the board approve fiscal year 21-22 budget and that you adopt resolution 2022-01 for the collection of integrated waste management fees and to provide any other direction which is appropriate for us to consider. And with that, I will open it up to questions. I do want board members to know that if you've got specific questions pertaining to line items, could you please make sure that you identify what line item that you're referring to? That'll help us narrow down things in a quicker manner. And Tyler will probably provide you the response because he's got that at his fingertips.
Okay, do you say you want to open this up for discussion for each individual board members have, I guess, go around and ask if they have questions?
Yeah, if anybody has any questions, we're prepared to provide you some responses.
I don't have, I guess Tyler, take a roll. However you do that when you
Yeah, absolutely.
ask each.
Oh, good.
I guess just in general, I'm curious with the end of our long-term debt, how the money that we've been paying in previous years is kind of accounted for in this budget. Are we using it to fund reserves, or do we have new projects that funding is going to?
Well, there's no plan yet because it's not, it'll come up in the next fiscal year.
Okay.
And so that'll be a discussion that the board will need to have. And of course, recognizing with 1383, it may end up helping to offset some of the costs around implementation of that. So that's going to be, it would actually be premature for us to have that conversation, but that will definitely be a conversational point for next year.
Okay, great. That was all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Carrera.
I don't have any questions, comments, and appreciate the Executive Advisory Committee's input. I definitely agree with the direction that we need to go. So appreciate their input.
Smith.
No comments at this time.
Castellano.
Sure. Thank you. Quick question. And thank you for all of the work on the budget. You know, I appreciate the detail, and it's nice to see the also the listing of the goals that have been accomplished in the past year and the goals that are anticipated for the coming year. But my question is, in terms of SP 1383, you know, and kind of looking towards that, I'm assuming that we can't really estimate for that yet, because we're kind of still waiting to see what the local task force comes up with and what our different jurisdictions come up with. Am I right? So
yeah,
kind of related to that, we'll have, I'm assuming, some need to kind of reevaluate things once we have a better understanding of where we're going with SP 1383.
That's correct. I think what you're going to be seeing from the Executive Advisory Committee, I mean, currently the ad hoc committees are working diligently, pretty much every couple of weeks right now. They're trying to kind of identify what the pathways will be, recognizing, of course, that we have 4 smaller entities here on the North Coast that will be able to apply for a waiver. Whereas we have the other entities that need to be making advancement by that January 1st, 2022 date. So there are varying levels of sort of urgency, if you will. And of course, in the case of the county, they've got a couple of large communities such as McKinleyville, and then they'll also have other areas that have populations in a census tract that will end up being potentially subject to either a waiver or possible exemption. So we're going to be trying to take a look at how we can get everybody onto some sort of a common ground, develop a pathway forward, identify where there could be some economies of scale, or you know, different counties are undertaking different approaches for some enforcement activities. They're defaulting to the county's code enforcement unit. I mean, I think that the county of Humboldt's code enforcement unit is 1, maybe 2 people. You know, so there's going to be a lot that's around what is going to be necessary and what we're going to need for implementation, and what that cost is going to be, and then how that cost gets portioned out. So we may very well see our overall rate structure have a fundamental overhaul. So it's going to be a pretty heavy lift, and I don't think that we necessarily need to have all the answers by January of 2022. You all need to have your ordinances approved. You know, so that's going to be on a jurisdiction by jurisdiction basis. But I think that the local task force is having those conversations to figure out what steps will be necessary, and then start building that around. And in the case of the rate structure, again, this kind of comes back to Elaine's comment around how are we going to handle that money that has now been retired. It's all going to factor in there in the next 1.5 to 2 years. I hope that provides some clarification on that. Okay. Next, Tyler.
Bone.
He's on mute. Rex, you have any questions?
I'm sorry, I'm good. I was on mute.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else?
And finally, Wilson.
Yeah, two items. One is I'm glad to hear the executive committee is recommending that HWMA take an active role in this 1383. We're one of the agencies that can get an exemption, but that's only going to last so long, and then eventually we're going to have to face it. I know there's discussion in the council about going to universal pickup, which also involves tying in with Fortuna going on to universal pickup, who's not on this board. But the thought being is that universal collection will help in how you deal with this, particularly the contamination of the organic waste mixed in with the landfill waste. And I don't see how a city, or at least the smaller ones or even a larger one, can deal with that without really going back to someone like Recology or HWMA, which in a sense goes back through Recology, if that's who your franchise agreement's with, to be able to monitor and at the curbside and deal with the contamination. So it's, I don't know, I guess agencies, like you said, are starting to wake up and say that this is a bigger deal than they realize. The thought that it's going to have to increase tipping fees, I think that's something that society is going to have to face. Also, that HWMA has money available, if I understand our budget system right, by retiring the debt, that we will have something to contribute as an entity that we're all members of. So I'm glad to see that was a recommendation. The other item that I have is just more of a curiosity for me, is how we take the revenues and the expenditures and we come out to exactly the dollar. I mean, somewhere we have to squish on some items to make that happen. I mean, it's not possible. I've actually seen a city budget where every single account, a fund, matched to the dollar. I mean, that's it was pretty unbelievable when I saw it. But so can you explain how you squish the balloon in order to make it?
Absolutely.
How do you do that to make it come out?
So I'll go ahead and have Tyler come in here, but I will tell you that, in part, it is also accomplished through a number of, saving reductions, being able to freeze those two positions, seeing the reduction of the operating reserve to this, lower amount. Last year was about 1.2 million because of the operational reserve. So there's been some moving, but go ahead, Tyler, you want to go ahead and touch on it a little further?
That does cover a lot of it. So one of the biggest things that we've had, and can everybody hear me all right?
Yeah.
Just make sure that's the thing. Okay, good. So one of the biggest benefits that we've had over the last few years are when we responded to the fuel crisis in 2008 and had our first big jump into our new tip fee structure and had a mid-year increase. There were a couple of years where we continued to budget the way that we had from pretty much the inception of the authority, which was to look at the annual expenses and budget directly for what we thought was the best estimate of those. And those often included some pretty generous assumptions for fuel costs, for per ton costs for hauling, and other items. And back then, a lot of the budget line items were very rough estimates that were often changed at mid-year pretty extensively. Some of you will probably even remember that up until just the last couple of years, we were presenting full budget evaluations at mid-year, which has now reduced to a 2-page report in the board packet. So we've had a lot less work on that because we've refined that information. But in those older days, we had a lot of sort of budget fluff, for lack of a better term. And as we tightened that those gears and got the information to be a little bit more specific, what we were able to do is use some of those overflow of funds that hadn't really been set aside for anything, and use those against some of the cost increases that we've seen over the last few years. So if we had capital improvement projects in our capital improvement plan, we absolutely had the funding for those. But if that was pretty much all we had, our reserves were sitting at one point almost $3 million. And we didn't have nearly enough projects or operating reserve needs to keep that money on hand. And that had actually kind of been even back in the day, something that especially the Executive Advisory Committee had noticed and had questioned about, is how much money we kept on hand. And so the budgets began to use some of that reserve funding to help keep the budget balanced. And part of the initially 3-year plan for that was that we would use those additional reserve funds to essentially pay the annual budget to stay even. And you'll even notice that this year, if you look at line 126 of the budget, which is on page 45 of 103, you'll notice that there's a $200 or $200,000 decrease in total reserve funds, because what we're doing with this last year of loan payments and these last few projects that we want to do in this coming fiscal year is we still have a little tiny bit of money left that can help us balance out the budget rather than putting it towards future projects when we'll have that $850,000 sort of free floating from here on out. So a lot of the magic that you're seeing, besides staff really, putting their pencil to paper and really getting some of these line items drilled down to some very specific expenses, and really making sure that we're controlling how we're spending our money now. The other item is that our reserves have been overfunded for quite some time, and we've reached that kind of equilibrium point where going forward, that wouldn't be the case. As Jill mentioned in the presentation, a $35,000 capital improvement fund at the end of the year isn't going to take care of anything. Not even talking about SB 1383. We have new equipment we're planning to replace. We have new facilities we're looking to at least enhance, if not, rebuild up at the landfill. And so that amount of money isn't going to do anything for us. And that's where some of that, the future money is going to come from. But we've actually just been using historical money to keep things balanced. I never anticipated it would be 5 years or 6 years even, but we did get there. And so we are just looking at that nice, it's a very nice moment in time where we're going to run down our long-term debt. We're going to run down our reserves to what we absolutely need. And moving forward, future planning is going to be the main topic of most budgets. And I do think that the Executive Advisory Committee recognizes that as well, and is going to be expecting us to discuss some growth no matter what in our tip fees. And I think it's reasonable to start preparing for that. But it's a lot of the reserves having been very overfunded for a while based on older policies, based on historical policies.
Okay, are you finished?
I am, yes, that was it.
Okay. I appreciate that answer, and I'm aware of how that has to take place. And I mainly wanted this in part to be put, I guess, essentially put into the record so that there is a clear understanding as we go forward that something has to give to get this to take place. And so when we go back and report to our separate agencies, we can tell them that look ahead to the future as they're seeing as well that there's probably going to have to be some increases in tipping. And again, that my personal opinion is of one of the pillars that makes communities work is garbage collection. You can't run a successful city or CSV or CSD without the ability to get rid of your garbage, along with water and sewer and electricity and police protection. So thank you for that explanation. Those are all the questions I have. Do we have, I think I'm the last board member, do we have anything from the public that would like to ask questions on the budget?
Again, I do not see any hands raised, and I have not seen anything in the chat requesting a chance to speak. So you appear to be clear, but we'll give it a second, I suppose, to see if anybody jumps in.
If that be the case, then I would entertain a motion on accepting. I believe is it just simply accepting the resolution. We approve the budget, and we also resolution 2022-01.
That is correct.
Is anyone wishing to make that
So moved.
Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
A second.
Oh, go ahead, Robin.
Thank you. I'll second that motion.
We have a motion with a second. Can we please vote?
Hogan,
Yes.
Pereira,
Aye.
Smith,
Aye.
Castellano,
Aye.
Bone,
Yep. Yeah.
Will.
Yes. It appears we have a unanimous decision, so that motion and resolution pass. The next item, I believe, is a standing.
Now, we actually have
We actually have
another
another thing.
item.
Consider support for a letter.
That is correct. So Chairman of the Board, I believe Wendy Ring is on the line. This request has come from her. She is looking at a letter of support that would be submitted to the Statewide Commission on Recycling and Marketing, their Organics Committee. And so Wendy, are you online and available?
I'm here.
Excellent. So I'm going to turn this over to you, but for the board, we are looking at submitting a letter to the Statewide Commission's Organics Committee for consideration. So Wendy, go ahead.
Great. May I share my screen? Can I do
Tyler?
that?
Tyler will get you set up in
Yeah,
just a minute.
I can click the button. I don't know what'll happen, but. Oh. It says it
Now
wants
we're
to
seeing your
record
screen.
it. Oh, it gets complicated. It wants to record and something about system preferences. Let's skip it. What the heck? Okay. Too much. Too much trouble. Okay. Well, then you can look at me instead. How's that? Oh, am I screen sharing now?
You are.
Oh, beautiful. Okay. I thought it wasn't happening. Okay, perfect. So there has been a lot of conversation with Cal Recycle about allowing farmers and ranchers to compost food waste. And not a lot has budged, but there is a proposal which was presented by Ted Ward, who is the director of Jill's counterpart in Del Norte. who is a member of this statewide commission that gives advice about how CalRecycle and other agencies are going to comply with our recycling goals. And so the proposal is very simple. It would direct CalRecycle to allow farmers and ranchers to compost up to 5,000 cubic yards of food waste from any source. And it would delay enforcement of SB 1383 in rural jurisdictions until the rule is changed, so that they're not forced into making arrangements like sending all of their food waste out of county. And just to give you an idea, and just in terms of how practical is this idea, this is roughly, these are figures that I got from the partially completed waste characterization study, just to show you what the volumes are in terms of undonatable food waste. And this is, it's not really that much if you're looking at a 3-month cycle for composting at the most. This is something that our local farmers and ranchers and dairy folks could easily do. I have talked with a number of them. They are enthusiastic about this proposal and about having this opportunity because they are hungry for compost. What would we gain? Well, if we didn't take it to the landfill, we would save about, just between the transportation and the emissions that aren't captured, we'd save about 9,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent a year. But the better thing is that when you apply the compost to the land, it stimulates photosynthesis. The plants pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. And so you get 3 times more carbon removed. The California Healthy Soils Program will also pay farmers about $300 an acre to apply that compost to their land, and ranchers. And where this has been done and studied in Marin, the ranchers have seen about a 40% increase in pasture productivity. So there's benefits all the way around.
How many acres did they do in Marin?
I don't know, I'm sorry. But this, it's been,
there was a lot more to it in Marin than just putting the compost on to get those results. And I'm just trying to figure out, I mean, did they do it on 10 acres? Did they do it on 1,000 acres? Did they?
Well, it's ongoing. I can try to get you more information, but they did it on a lot of acres, and they're doing it on more acres, and they've reproduced it in other parts of the state. And it was basically just compost application. That this particular study that was done. So the equivalent climate impact is rather large. It's something that we can do here in Humboldt County. So this proposal is going before the statewide commission on the 17th, and they just want very short statements of support. So I strongly encourage HWMA to do this, but also the different jurisdictions, if this looks like an alternative that you would think about using, then this is the way to get that to happen. I think in terms of, the discussion beforehand about contamination, from talking to farmers in the East Coast and states on the East Coast where this is already permitted and where it's already going on, they actually get less contamination from their residential customers, because when residential customers know that it's going to a local farmer and it's in a small enough community where the farmer, it sort of changes what you're going to put in that container.
So
can I say one more thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
So just in terms of who's interested in this, the California Alliance of Family Farmers is going to support it. They've had a pretty enthusiastic response. Also, the Coalition of Organic Farmers, the Western United Dairymen are in favor and will be submitting a comment. So this is something that will help our local agricultural community. It'll help us solve our 1383 problems without having to build a giant facility. And it'll help the climate and the local economy.
So the only thing I want to add for the board's consideration is that this is really just the beginning step. Approval by the organics subcommittee to take up this item doesn't put it into play immediately. It'll end up working its way through. The statewide commission is required to issue some preliminary recommendations to the state legislature as well as state and other federal agencies before January 1st of 2021. So this will help to identify this as a potential area of interest. And of course, it would better align in terms of some of the tiered permitting there's a difference between Cal Recycle's regulations and the State Water Resources Control Board. And so this would also help to bring those two together for potential composting. So it's a little early. There's no legislation that's been introduced or anything like this, but at least it initiates the conversation so that it could be vetted in such a manner that we will eventually see something coming forward to help with the alternate forms of processing food and other organic waste. And so we are asking that the board consider approving the draft letter that you see. I do want to note that the submittal has to be made into Cal Recycle's public comment portal, and it's got a 150-word limit. And Wendy and I were doing a lot of work on this. We got it down to 149. So we are good. And that concludes the presentation.
Okay. Board comment. Does anyone have comment on this issue? Don't see any raised hands or voices.
Yeah, I tried getting hold of Zach Cahill today and talked to him a little bit about it, and he had a brief conversation with Miss Ring, I think, about this. He said it was very preliminary, and he's just like anybody else. I guess we should look at it, but I worry about our organic status, and I've read countless stuff on this, but it's a long ways away, and it's done in other areas, but I know they're approaching it in the valley just very reluctantly. It sounds like we're all in. Jill's helping write the letter. I guess we're kind of in on it. So.
I guess my question: how will it affect our status?
May I answer that? Because I did some research on this, and I talked to the folks who do the organic certification, and they do not limit feedstock for organic agriculture operations to organic input, because if they did, there wouldn't be enough. So this is the way it's that you can make your compost out of things that are not organic, and it does not affect your organic certification. And I've asked 3 different certifying agencies, same answer everywhere.
Which one was that, Omni and then RD, or which ones were they?
Omni was one, and I'm sorry, I don't recall. And I talked to somebody from CCOF, and I can't remember who the third one was, but it's not, it sounds a little counterintuitive, but that's the way it is.
Huh.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I'll
Yeah,
go
you're-
ahead. I have a comment. I
Okay.
think I'm definitely in support of signing this letter, because I think allowing our locally farmers to compost a larger amount could help us with SB 1383 implementation if we had local sources for our organic waste. So it sounds like changing this rule would help kind of streamline things and help us with implementation. So I'm definitely for it. And I saw, Wendy, that you're also set to present to the Humboldt Food Policy Council of which I'm a member separately for public health. And so I'll be interested to see what the Food Policy Council has to say about it as well. But yeah, as far as from the HWMA perspective, I'm in support of signing the letter. And thank you for the presentation.
Any other comment?
I have a comment. I also support this, and I appreciate Wendy's the research that people are more mindful of what they put into their kind of organic bins when they know that it's staying local. I think that's just it makes sense, but it's interesting to see that kind of sense of consequence plays out in people's actions. And just a quick question, this just basically gives farmers the option to do something, on site. It doesn't mandate that they have to or anything like that. So, I think that would, am I right? Sorry, just to make sure before I go on. I see Jill nodding. Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. But I think that the key thing is that, they're certified organic, and then there are a number of farmers that are, non-certified organic. And this isn't directing or mandating or changing anything. This is simply a recommendation to be taken up by a subcommittee of a statewide committee that will make recommendations to the legislature. So, like I said, it's a little premature, but it's initiating the conversation and awareness.
Great. Thank
Okay.
you. and I, and I think that, that in and of itself is for me another reason to support this, is just because I think it is kind of critical that we have as many of these conversations now while we can. So so thanks for bringing this forward. And I guess I'll wait to see if other people want to make comment rather than make a motion.
Any other comment? Seeing none, do we have any public comment?
I've seen a hand going up and down, but it doesn't appear to be up anymore.
Whose hand was it? Maybe they would still like to chat.
I believe the gentleman's name is Ben. It's B. Winker
Okay.
on our participant list.
Ben, if you would like to address the board, you'll need to unmute yourself.
We may be fine though. And I'm seeing no other.
Does it look like Ben wants to talk? So if we have no other public comment, then I will entertain a motion on whether we accept this letter.
I'll make a motion to send the letter of support to the Statewide Commission on Recycling Markets, or submit the letter of support to the Statewide Commission on Recycling Markets and Curbside Recycling's Organics Committee regarding small scale farm and ranch composting.
I second.
Do we have a second?
Yeah, I'll second that, Elaine.
All right. With a motion and a second, please vote.
And before I start, I will note that Director Bone had to leave for another meeting, so he is not going to be part of this vote. Hogan.
Yes.
Carrera.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Castellano.
I
Wilson.
Yes.
And Director Bone is absent.
So that motion passes with unanimous, with one absent. Moving on to item 6. Standing item, receive update from Cal Recycle CRV beverage container program. Executive Director.
Yeah, it's It's a little light this month. The introduced bills are working their way through the respective committees. And of course, the board has taken some positions that have been submitted to our representatives on that. Our CRC and the California League of Cities are continuing to keep HWMA involved. A quick update as far as the out-of-county recycling center owner who is interested in evaluating the possibility of coordinating with HWMA, Recology, and Humboldt Sanitation in establishing an additional recycling center in Humboldt if appointments become available. They have been reaching out to a number of property owners that would meet the criterion that they are trying to meet so that they can secure handling fees and things like this. But at this point, they have been unable to secure an affordable site or sites to rent. So we do touch bases periodically just to see what their advancement has been, but they're a bit stymied on that front. So we are developing a proposal for an upcoming board meeting so that you can all receive, discuss, and provide direction for CRV services. I do want to remind board members, before we start having a bigger conversation around that, we did talk about some implementation costs and presented that to the board last January, and that included several staffing scenarios, and we didn't get explicit direction at that time. So when we're having the conversation next go around, we're going to be pushing a little bit deeper on needing some specifics. I do want folks to remember too that the contractor that we have been using for CRV glass hauling services is also decertified. So we're going to have to find a way in which to transport the CRV glass services to the San Leandro processing facility, which is where CRV glass, well, glass in general goes to. Because there are no other facilities that are conducting this type of CRV buyback and recycling operation within the county, the city of Eureka has stated that it is not a sustainable option to continue with street closure for any extended period of time. And so they noted that the closures that we had relative to our operations last September reduced emergency access, increased safety risk, as well as inhibited access to other businesses in the area. And that included our business. We were having to route trash trucks, green waste, and other like HHW around people who were waiting in line for CRV. And so the city has requested that HWMA produce alternate options without impacting the surrounding businesses. And so they too were suggesting the appointment-based drop-off, which is why we've pushed so hard with our state representatives, and hopefully 1311 will move forward to enable that. As noted, 1311 is continuing to work its way through committees, and hopefully that will be our answer. And that concludes the CRV portion of the update.
All right, any questions or comments for Jill on this issue? Appears we have none. I'll just make one comment myself, is that it appears that Eureka is able to have block streets for fast food restaurants, but not for CRV. It just seems a little, it seems kind of odd, where priorities live. So anybody that's affiliated with the city of Eureka can take note of that and pass it on to the appropriate individuals. I don't know if we need public comment on this. Is that necessary?
No.
No, you're not taking action. You certainly could entertain it if you want, but you don't. It's not required.
All right, I'm going to close this item and move on to standing item member board reports. Any board?
Would you like me to roll this, Frank?
I'm sorry. Were you going to do like a roll call?
Yes, I can do that for you if you would like. Hogan.
Nothing to report.
Herrera.
Report. Thank you.
Smith.
No report from Brigadoon.
Castellano.
Just real quickly to Board Chair Wilson. This is the first I had heard of that, so I will follow up on that and find out some more information about that. Yeah, I'm imagining it may be because of the duration or hours, but I don't know. I'll find out why the case is different for that. And then just, in terms of updates, I've been working with community services, and we did a collaborative cleanup / kind of road improvement to the Wabash area, where we weeded and did plantings in a lot of the planters along Wabash, and we'll be continuing those efforts. The biggest item that was found that people were picking up was cigarette butts. Many cigarette butts. So that's just something, in other cleanups I've participated in, that has also been the case. So I don't know, it's just something I've been thinking about, maybe what kinds of education may be worthwhile to put out there regarding that. And also, if we need, there's for sure a commercial institution on Wabash that sells cigarettes. So, whether they could be encouraged to have just a receptacle for something like that. So that's my big update. Thanks.
Thank you.
And Wilson.
I have nothing to report. So with that, we will move on to, we have, I believe, item 8 is the Executive Director's report.
Yeah, there's a few big items for the board. One relates to our green waste. So green waste drop-off is going to be unavailable at HWMA's Hawthorne Street Transfer Station starting Friday, May 21st through Saturday, May 22nd. So we're looking at 2-day closure, and so that we can perform some repair and retrofit within the green waste drop-off area. If you were to come in with a truck and you were to back up, you will find yourself dropping into a hole of about 18 inches. So we're going to finally, we're able to get a contractor out there so that we can do some patchwork, and we're going to do a little reconfiguration of the bunker itself. So customers won't be able to drop off their green waste at the Hawthorne Street Transfer Station, and we are encouraging that people just simply haul directly to West Green Landscaping. They are located at 6360 West End Road. They, West Green is where all of our material ultimately ends up being transported to for processing. So this will just bring it directly to them. We will be having franchise trucks drop off in the Happy Valley location, and then we'll make sure that the self-haul is able to be accommodated at West Green's location. So certainly we apologize for the inconvenience, but ultimately it's going to end up making our site better, safer, and not have such a drop off. So we've issued press releases today, and we've got some informational handouts that are being distributed to customers. We do have regular customers that come in sometimes on a daily basis with material. So we're reaching out to them, and we will also be broadcasting the changes over the radio in the next week. So speaking of radio and treated wood waste, as I noted a little bit earlier, our variance waiver has been approved, and we are going to be preparing for that change. We're going to have to get a written notice to the county LEA, and we will make the announcement via press releases, radios, and print ads when we are ready to resume treated wood waste at the transfer station. I do want to note that the radio spots and the outreach that has been done, by the county using their website, in addition to some of the print ads that we've had, but really, I think especially the radio ads, people are coming in. The materials have been, properly, cut into the segment length. They know what to expect. It's been pretty seamless, and I really appreciate the public's willingness to work with us as, we all had to pivot rather quickly in December with this change. So we did provide our support to a letter that was submitted by California League of Cities, RCRC, and California State Association of Counties, and a number of other entities regarding the support of SB 322. And that is going to codify the alternate management standards. So we are hoping that that will move forward and that the governor will sign it. So, the governor didn't sign the last provision that resulted in our having to do this dramatic pivot. So the other things to let board members know, as noted earlier, is that the Solid Waste Local Task Force ad hoc groups have been meeting pretty routinely, talking about recycling contamination in addition to implementation of 1383. Cal Recycle staff is now meeting with all the jurisdictions as well as HWMA where appropriate to discuss SB 1383 readiness assessments. So your respective councils are receiving presentations, and there's going to be coordination meetings that identify implementation pathways and, frankly, where there's opportunities for regional cooperation. And quite frankly, SB 1383 is the regional activity prioritization over the last 2 months, and has been pretty remarkable to see the energies that everybody's putting into helping move this step forward. Again, as noted, the Executive Advisory Committee did meet on April 29th, and we've had numerous meetings with the City of Fortuna to discuss the LEA fee and potentially incorporating household hazardous waste services so that residents, that hasn't gone before council, but there may be a consideration that residents pay for the services and then they're able to drop off their materials just like your residents are to HWMA's facility at no charge when they bring their materials for hazardous waste. The loading agreements for Recology and Humboldt Sanitation that I addressed last month. Again, they both expire this year. We now have the amendment for the loading agreement with Recology. Humboldt Sanitation's agreement expires at the end of December. And so we have now developed and we've distributed a universal satellite loading agreement, and I expect that the parties will be reviewing and we'll probably have some refined conversations over the next month. And certainly this is going to be a welcome shift because we can ensure that both of our satellite facilities are meeting the same conditions in terms of the standards for the loading of our member agency materials to the landfills. And of course, there's been ongoing support and coordination for the ED recruitment efforts. And that concludes my portion of the ED report.
Back to the board. Any questions by board members for Jill's report? Doesn't sound like I'm hearing any responses.
Lots of head shaking.
I appreciate the effort on doing particularly with the solid waste management side of it, that they are giving attention to this. So it's people are beginning to listen, I hope. That concludes, I believe, all of our items, except we have a closed session. And I'll let Jill explain how we're going to remove everybody and get us into that meeting.
What I'm going to ask first, Frank, and I'm happy to read it if you'd like. We just need to announce that we're going into closed session. And of course, the public has an opportunity to address the board prior to our going into closed session. So if it's all right with you, I'll go ahead and read that in, and then we'll have Tyler remove everybody if there's no comment. So it is the intention of the Board of Directors to meet in closed session for one item, public employment, executive director pursuant to Government Code Section 54957. Is there any public comment? Any board member comment for the open session part?
I
Okay,
had not seen any.
excellent. Thank you, Tyler. Can you go ahead and start kicking everybody out, including studio control?
Yes, thank you. So studio control is